Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next row. And one of the important things to do when you're going between rows, now we've got to count not only how many down, but with this particular pattern, the words live and love are not right exactly on top of each other. They're not exactly the same size. So we need to make sure that we're counting it correctly. So it ends up as this centered word. So now let's look at this pattern and see how this works. So if I look at the relationship between the first line and the second line, I can see that there's one row between, one block between them. But the L of the love starts 2 stitches before the L of live. Okay, so it's one row down, 2 over. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my fabric, and let's see, 1 down, and count 1, 2 over. And I'm just going to leave the needle through there so I can double check it. 1 down, 1, 2 over. And this is easier to manage with a smaller project like this. It's just really good habits to get into, starting doing and counting carefully, because if you do any larger cross stitch projects, it can get really complicated with how many counts you have to make. All right, so there's where we're going to start our L, and our L, just like before, is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 across, 1, 2, 3 over. Okay. So here's where we're starting, the 1 down, the 2 over. Two. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. All right, so we've got 8 down, and now we can go 3 over in that perpendicular line. 1, 2, 3. All right, so now that we've done the first diagonal, we can go back and do the second and make those crosses. All right, so now we've got the second line begun with the L from love. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this off. So now we've gotten our cross stitch, the first word completed, and the L of the second word completed. So we need to go ahead and work on our heart. And in my previous examples, I had a heart done in cross stitch. I'll show that to you again. So the heart in cross stitch would just be doing X's once again for each of the blocks. However, since the instruction also includes some information on how to do a satin stitch, I'm going to do that for this particular version of the cross stitch pattern, just to show you the difference. You have options though, you kind of have to pick what you would like to do best. So for this particular, for satin stitch, we're going to be skipping instead of doing every stitch. So some people prefer it because it is slightly a quicker method. So to do the steps, to start our satin stitch, I'm going to go ahead and get my red thread. All right. And now I am going to thread my embroidery needle, just the same needle as we were using before. There we are. And with the satin stitch, rather than making crosses, we're just going to make one line from one side to another across the entire heart. And it is kind of a shorter way to do it, but it also gives you a different look. I'm only going to do this with 2 strands of embroidery thread. As I said, you can do it with more. In order for the heart to be fully filled in like it is in the picture, you would have to do it with the full 6 strands. And that can be very challenging for those who are new to embroidery and cross stitch. So I'm just going to use the 2. Really, it's a personal decision. You decide how you want yours to look. So I see here that what I've got to do is count 4 stitches. Then there's going to be 1 satin stitch, and then 3, and then another satin stitch to form the very top of the heart. So we're going to start with counting the 4 between the L and the heart. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and I'm just going to double check that count. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's 1 stitch straight across. Lost my thread, so I'm gonna have to rethread my. This is definitely where the threader comes in handy. All right. So we've got 1, and then we're going to have 3 in the pattern. 1, 2, 3, and then another stitch. So 1, 2, 3, and then another stitch. Now in embroidery fabric, it doesn't have the holes in it like it does with this particular kind of cross stitch fabric. So you can get much closer than you can with the Aida cloth, which is why this is going to look a little different. So I see on my pattern that I've got 3 stitches separated by 1. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So I've got 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. So I'm going to go back under and back up. There's skipping 1 block. 1, 2, 3. So you see it's going to be kind of an outline of a heart. All right. And so we're going to go back to our pattern. And it looks like we've just got straight across rows, 2 straight across rows. And I'm going in order to maintain tension, I'm not going all the way back to this side of the work. It starts to get loose if you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here and do one all the way across and line it up. There's one. And I've got, go back to my pattern. There's the one, and then I've got another one down. So I'm coming back to my work. And all the way across. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got one more of the full all the way across. All right, and then now we're going to start pulling, going one less stitch in. All right, one less on each side. And again, one less, so it's going to go across 3 blocks or 3 stitches. And the final point of the heart is just 1, as before. All right, so that's the way that the satin stitch version of the heart looks. It this is the 2-strand version. If you wanted to do a full 6-strand version, it will be closer to being filled in. However, it will, as I said, be much more difficult to do, especially with this size of cloth. You just kind of have to decide which one you like better to do. So this is the satin stitch versus the cross stitch. You decide which one you like best, and that's the one that you want to go with. And so after this, we need to continue doing the stitches for the rest of the phrase with the VE and the MEOW. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we can finish our border, choose whether or not we're going to have a border, and then go ahead and finish the ornament itself so it sits in that little frame. So I'm tying off the end in the back. I'm going to trim off the excess. All right. And now we're going to go ahead and work on the V. And I'm ready to go ahead and continue. So I'm going to go here, and I've got 2 between the top of 2 empty blocks between the top of the heart and the V. So 1, 2, and then my V starts with a single block. Zoom in a little bit better. So we've got 1, 2, right? And then I'm going to start with the top of the V. And then I've got another single stitch. And with our V in this particular kind of lettering, it looks like I'm doing 2 and 2 for the next couple of rows right next to each other. And it's just a stylized kind of writing. You can get fonts that do different things. There are many resources that do different fonts. So there's 1, 2 of the first. And 1, 2 of the second. Then we go back to our pattern, and we've got, coming from the rightmost part of that leg, we've got 1, 2 singles by themselves. One, 2. And let's go back to the pattern. And we've got 1, 1, 2, 1, 2 next to each other. And then going back to the pattern, we've got the 1, 2 next to each other that we just did, and then 1 beneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that part of the outline. And then just as on the other side, I've got 1 next to it and then 1 right above it. So a lot of these are, and you'll see that in a lot of different kinds of cross stitch font, is that a lot of them will mirror one side or the other, especially with some kind of basic block letters like this is. So there's 1. Two, right? Go back to the pattern, 1 next to it. So we were just finished this 1, 2 part here. So we're going to come over here and finish the rest of the V. One. All right, and then 1, 2 by themselves again, connecting to that last stitch. One right on top of the other. All right, and then go back to the pattern. And then we see here 1, we've got that block of 4 again, just like we had before. So 2 right next to each other. And it's coming directly above the leg of the V. So. Okay, so we've got that, and you can see that it mirrors, both sides are the same so far, and the end will also be the same here. So we've got 2 additional stitches coming off the furthest right hand side. So this part, oops. Oh, and this brings up a really nice point. If you're doing something like this and you've got stitches that stack on top of each other, you may end up undoing your stitch. So you can always come at your cross stitch, the diagonal, from the other side too. So instead of going from the bottom up, you can come from the top down. It's really whatever works best for you. All right, so I've got the first leg of my cross stitch here, and I'm starting to run a little short on thread in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this off and get a new section of embroidery thread to go back the other direction. To go back the other direction on the V. And you can start either way. It's whatever makes most sense to you. I'm just going to start where we stopped. So I'm going to go ahead and cross the first stitch. Sometimes you have to take a couple of stabs at it to try to find where that corner is. But it's something that you get more practice with in time. And it is very repetitive. All you're doing is over and over again, drawing little X's with your thread. But it can be very soothing, especially after you get used to the motion and get used to finding the spots where your needle's supposed to go. You came unthreaded. Go. All right, so there we've got another V, just like our first one. Go ahead and flip it over and tie this one off. And then trim off the excess just like before. And then we'll get a start in on the E. Now I can start my E. And if I refer again to the pattern, the E looks like it's one block between the E and the V. So there's going to need to be one block between. And it looks like it goes 4 across. And just for continuity's sake, I start at the end so I can go down directly instead of going this way, having to either tie off or draw a long length of thread over here and then go down. So I'm going to start over here, and that means 1 for the blank and 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks over. So here's my work. So we've got 1 for the empty space. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm just going to double check my measuring. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks good. And we're just going to start again. So it's 4 over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 1. Oops. My tail was a little bit long on that. Two. Three. 4. All right, and then we go back to our pattern, and it looks like it's going to be 2 blocks straight down from that last stitch. So 1, 2, and we'll go back to the pattern, and it says, so we've done the 2 here. Now we need to do 3 across, and it looks like it's going to be a double block for the E, just like before. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're just going to keep going. Two, 3. And just go down the very next row. Go back the way we came. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go back to our pattern. So we've finished the block of 2 3s in the middle. So again, just the same as in the top, we're going to do 2 stitches directly below. 1, 2. Okay, and back to the pattern. And it looks like just as in the top leg, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 across the bottom. 4. All right, so there's the first part of our E. So we're going to go back and do it the other way now. Cross all of those diagonal lines. Oops. Came unthreaded. Thread that guy again. All right, and then we just go back to where we were. You can see that one has the only uncrossed diagonal from that row. This one's really not wanting to stay threaded, is it? Sometimes that happens. Get a length of thread that just seems particularly slippery. Try to hold it a little further down. We are getting kind of at the end of it. And again, I just look back to the diagonal that wasn't crossed. Oops, doing it again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change my thread here since my thread is being somewhat difficult. I will pull it through, thread it and pull it through one more time for this stitch. But since it keeps coming off of there, it's a good time to change thread. So I'm going to go ahead and go to E. So just go back to the last diagonal. I'm just going to go ahead and cross that one and then go to the previous row. All right, now I just need to tie off that end. And cut out the excess. And then we can consider our final row.